What up? Thanks for being here. Stoked to have you. This week, we're going to stick with some psychedelic content, and I'm going to talk to you about combining mindfulness with navigating psychedelic journeys. These are some things that I've picked up over the years, navigating my own experiences, as well as helping my clients move through theirs. So, I want to start with the idea that you are not your thoughts. I'm sure you've heard that before. If you're familiar with mindfulness at all or with any type of meditation, you've probably heard a teacher or a guide tell you, you are not your thoughts. And then the next question that follows is, well, what the hell? I feel like I am. So how does that make sense? So let's begin to break down like what is the process happening with your thoughts and why do they feel like they're you? Like why is it so easy to identify as the thought? So first I want to talk about conditioning. Like how do we even get conditioned to believe certain things? And there's lots of reasons, but I want to first start with something I was talking about last week, and that's felt sense experiences. So those are experiences that resonate through the entire body. Okay, so if you have an experience that you feel on every level, mind, body, soul, energetically, then it's going to be hardwired into your system, meaning it will become the template that you overlay other experiences and relate to them in that way. There's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, there is just so much sensory input in the world. We have to have templates. Another word for that, psychological term for that, is heuristics to like make sense of what we're seeing. It's why we have stereotypes. It's why we have judgments, because our brain is just consolidating a bunch of information, overlaying the template so that we can make sense of it really quickly. You could also imagine that experiences like trauma that hardwire or hijack our nervous system become ingrained, and then we begin to see danger where there is an actual danger. We're hypervigilant, or we begin to see threat in relationships when there actually isn't threat. So that's what I'm talking about when I say it's wired into our nervous system. This also contributes to our conditioning, which again then makes it very difficult to separate, well, how am I not my thought if my thought elicits this much reaction in me? We also have to look into our attachment and our development. Like, what was the soup that we were cooked in? That's what one of my favorite authors and psychologists, Brad Reedy, says. He refers to the soup you were cooked in. So basically, what's the flavoring that you have based on your development, and how does that continue to come into your relationships and your experiences and just kind of permeate how you view the world? Now, again, fundamentally, those are all just contributing to the way that we think about things. It doesn't mean that you are those experiences, but the ego and the mind grasps onto that so tightly that it becomes very confusing to separate us from what we're thinking. So thoughts take over, but again, fundamentally, they're not you. They're tuning into your programming and they're based on conditioning. You don't have to be your thoughts. So I want to just say that I don't expect that to shift the way that you relate to your thoughts, but it gives you a little bit of more information and it gives us a little bit of distance. So I want to talk about becoming the observer. And there's so much information out there from masters who are far more adept at teaching this than I am and who have decades of experience. So people like Thich Nhat Hanh, Pema Chödrön, Jack Cornfield. Like if you're interested in really diving into the mindfulness world, go look up them, read their books. They will give you so much information. So instead of recounting their work, I want to talk about my own experience with mindfulness, how this has shown up in my life, and what I've learned by becoming the observer of my experience. So to be honest with you, I never meditated until about a year and a half ago, and I started meditating regularly. It was my resolution in 2023 was to meditate more days than I did not, and I'm happy to report I succeeded. But in that process, I really began to develop a meditation process where I was able to detach enough from what I was thinking and what I was feeling, and I was able to become the observer of my experience. All right, so I have a meditation practice going. I'm feeling really connected. I'm feeling really able to attune to my experience. And then one day I'm driving home from work. I'm driving home from work and I pull onto the road that leads to the freeway. It's the same route I take every single day. And I drive up to the red light and I stop there. And as I'm sitting there, this really massive truck pulls up behind me and puts his bumper on the back of my car. And at first, like it didn't even compute. Like he ran in really slowly or moved in really slowly, just gently got on there and then kind of like nudged my car. And I was like, what the hell? Like that's weird. I'm glad he didn't hit me harder. And I moved my car forward just to kind of get out of his way, thinking that it was an accident. Well, the guy behind me proceeds to move his truck forward again, puts his truck right on my bumper, and nudges me again. And at this point, it's like clicking with me that I did something. Maybe I cut this guy off. I had no idea. I was totally unaware of having done anything to interrupt his like process of driving. But apparently I had, and he was letting me know. So at this point, I start to freak out a little bit. And again, I'm like very immersed in a meditation process. So I literally had the thought, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to observe what happens in my body. I'm pretty stoked that I did that, to be honest. I think that's kind of a high level thing, and I'm not doing that anymore because I've kind of lost my meditation process, but it felt like a perfect experiential moment to kind of drop into that. Okay, so guys on my bumper, I'm in my car. I say, I'm going to watch my experience. First off, I start looking at him in the mirror, and he's looking at me, and it's clear to me that he is angry, and that he's kind of giving me a big FU. And so instantly, I feel this flush through my whole body. Okay, it just feels like fiery energy, starts at the top of my head, goes through my entire system, down through my stomach, my chest, into my legs, and into my hands. And I remember viscerally feeling this tingling sensations in my hands and feet. Okay, and then running parallel to this sensational process that's happening in my body, I'm beginning to formulate a plan. And I'm beginning to ask myself questions like who the hell does this guy think he is? Like, I'm going to get out of my car right now. I'm going to go confront him. I'm going to say something to him. And then there's also a lot of fear, like, oh, you can't do that. Don't do that. You don't know who this guy is. He's clearly crazy enough to put his truck on the back of your bumper at a crowded intersection, and he's not concerned about anybody knowing. Like, who knows what he's capable of doing? And then a second voice that sits there and says, you cannot let this man walk all over you. Like, you have to do something about it. Meanwhile, my body is continuing to just like escalate so much energy, like really a trauma response, or not necessarily a trauma response, but like full nervous system activation into fight or fight, flight or fight or freeze. So I'm sitting there, I'm continuing to think, the light turns green, and I quickly think, okay, if I get on the freeway, this guy is going to harass me the whole way home. So I decide in that moment that I'm not going to get on the freeway. I'm going to cut across the other lane, and I'm going to take a different route home and hope that he doesn't follow me. So I pause. All the cars are driving past me. People are honking at me because I'm supposed to be getting on the freeway. And I actually cut across, and I take the route, and he does not follow me. Thank God. So then I start driving home. Now I have about 15 minutes to drive home, and I keep thinking, I'm going to continue to watch my thoughts and my body. The tingling sensation in my hands and feet does not go away. It gets even more intense. And now that I've driven away, I begin to be really harsh to myself. I begin telling myself that I am soft, that I can't stand up for myself, that I can't fight for myself. Of course, you walked away. You're disrespected. You're not capable. Just a really critical voice, which surprised me. And again, I was able to just be detached. I was just watching, like, what is going on? Who is this voice that is berating me right now, who's really judgmental and not quite supportive of my decision to avoid a confrontation? So I continue to drive. 5 minutes goes by, body is beginning to calm down. 10 minutes go by, body is kind of falling back into a homeostatic mode. Thoughts are turning off. I'm getting a little bit more of a gentle, compassionate voice on board telling me, like, man, that was crazy. I think you made the right choice. Good job. We didn't get in a fight. We didn't escalate the situation further. So a little bit more kindness and compassion. 15 minutes go by. I drive home. I pull into my driveway. And at that point, the whole thing had moved through my body, moved through my mind, and I was able to just be calm, centered, and collected. And what that experience showed me after I reflected upon it for a while was that there was going to be an automatic response and process that was going to take place in my body and my mind, regardless of if I could fight it, stop it, shift it. Like, it was going to happen. And the best thing that I could do in that moment was to be the observer of the experience. So I consciously separated. I envisioned like a part of me goes to right here, becomes the observer, watches everything that's happening in the body, notices the thoughts, and just consciously kind of takes notes. And I want to make a point here too. This is not a dissociated, numbed out, floating observer, because again, remember how attuned to my body and the sensations I was. This is an engaged and present observing response. And that's something to really remember, because we can fall into the trap of like, oh, I'm a really good meditator, when we're actually just like quite dissociated and numb most of the time. And I think there is a subtle distinction there that I'll talk about in other videos, but it's kind of beyond the scope of what I want to get into today. So that's a real life example of me observing my experience and noticing sensations, thoughts, and just staying kind of like a neutral observer, noticing the critical voice, welcoming the compassionate voice later, and just being in it. So I like to use this helpful acronym, and I got this from Jack Kornfield. You can also, it's in so much writing. It's in Tara Brach. She talks about it often on her podcast or her, yeah, I guess it is a podcast. I highly recommend checking out Tara Brach if you're looking for guided meditations. Her Spotify channel is just loaded. So the acronym is RAIN. So RAIN stands for R, recognize what is happening. A, allow the experience to be there just as it is. I, investigate with interest and care, and then nurture with self-compassion. So I went through that RAIN process without necessarily knowing that I was going through that. But that's a really helpful acronym to remember so that you can become the observer of your experience. All right, so now let's tie this to the psychedelic journey, because I really do think this is a helpful framework for going into psychedelic medicine and psychedelic spaces and allowing a level of mindfulness. But I want to again make the point here that it's an attached mindfulness. It's an embodied mindfulness. So one of the questions that comes up for me all the time when I engage in medicine experiences is, can you entertain the notion of blank? And it's almost like the medicine or the energy or entity attached to the medicine is kind of like challenging me. Like, oh, you think that you can navigate this space effectively? Well, can you entertain the notion that whatever? And so, I've been in medicine sessions where the question comes to me like, can you entertain the notion that nobody loves you? And that's a really visceral, freaking scary, shitty feeling to hold. But I find that if I always answer I respond to the question as, I can't entertain the notion. I'm not going to say that I believe it or that it's true, but I could entertain the notion. I've been asked to entertain the notion that you are a failure. I've had really intense somatic psychedelic experiences where I essentially thought I was giving birth. And in this last one that I had, the child that I was giving birth to was stillborn. And so it was like, can you entertain the notion that this baby that you've been carrying is stillborn? I know that sounds so wild if you're not familiar with these spaces. And I don't mean to suggest that I know what it is like to carry a baby. It's very psychosomatic. I understand that. But entertaining the notion, mindfully watching, like, okay, that baby's stillborn. What does that mean? Immense grief, so much grief. But with the RAIN, or the mindful exercise of observing what's going on, it's a little bit easier to allow the medicine to take you where it wants to go and to not fight. I've been asked to entertain the notion that my parents never loved me, which I know isn't true. But in an altered, highly altered psychedelic state, it's very easy to get caught up in the what ifs and then to kind of spiral out of control because we're not mindfully attuning to the experience of whatever you're being asked to consider. And this is building on what I was talking about in my last video about like doing the proper work so that you can stay in an embodied awareness without dissociating out of the experience. And so when the medicine brings to you the notion of really intense, traumatic, scary things, it really benefits you to have this capacity to be able to sit with that, to sit with the unknown, or to not fight against pain, suffering, and hardship. And almost always, inevitably, on the other side of a level of deep acceptance or entertaining of what is or what could be, is usually joy. And it's usually bliss. And it's usually a reward with experiencing the beauty of all things after entertaining the notion of the shadow or the dark side of whatever that experience is. Okay, so that's how me personally, I bring mindfulness into a preparation process for psychedelic medicine. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. Everyone's going to have different processes and protocols and ways of coping with these things. But for me, this has been a really cohesive overlap and something that I've incorporated into, again, my journeys, and then something I help my clients work towards when they're preparing to go into medicine journeys and medicine spaces. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for sharing with me your most valuable resource, which is your attention. Guard it. People want to steal it from you. They want to sell you shit. They want to distract you. It's your most precious resource. Hone that into a fine-toothed instrument that you can use strategically. Now I'm rambling. Thank you for being here. If you enjoy this channel, please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment, share what you think about mindfulness and psychedelics. Does it make sense to you to use it? And I hope to see you next week. Thanks for being here.